before we start, I don't know whether Nick O'Byrne gets enough props and he and our show because they're interested and interesting, and I reckon we should give them a clap for putting on such an incredible big sound. That was gratuitous. Ladies and gentlemen, cats and dogs, peeps and peers, I have the rather auspicious and intimidating facilitator role today. I'm introducing Amanda fucking Palmer. My name is Mikey fucking Carl. I'm hoping it'll be a cross between Frost Nixon and Molly Iggy. I'll play Nixon, and maybe you can play Iggy, or I don't. It's a shit joke. Now, rather than give you an overview of Amanda's career, because you're sort of mostly privy to her illustrious career, I'll give you sort of 5 things I think you need to know before we get into these questions and indeed this hour. Amanda Palmer was once a living statue in Boston. People would give her money and she would hand them a flower and some intense eye contact. Palmer has been a member of a goth cabaret ne'er-do-wells who did quite well, the Dresden Dolls, a conjoined twin mime act, Evelyn, currently plays with her band and the Grand Theft Orchestra. Touring Australia, playing to big crowds, fulfilling their promises to Australian fans. We'll touch on the Kickstarter stuff in a second. In fact, right now. You aimed to raise $100,000 and you raised 1.2 or nearly $1.2 million to promote and tour the Theatre is Evil record. Thing number 4, the TED Talk. Amanda's TED Talk, The Art of Asking, received a standing ovation and was roundly applauded for its honesty and its very succinct 12-minute explanation of how you asked fans for cash and rewarded them in a plethora of ways. The basic contention was, don't make people pay for music, let them. And lastly, Amanda met a transvestite McDonald's worker in Perth a few days ago who was having a farewell party before he came to Melbourne. And of course, she gave them all tickets to the show and hung out with them and had that really incredible connection. So yeah, those are the 5 things. I won't crap on too much too. She's going to do most of the talking. So first times, a bit of a category, first times. When's the first time that you played a gig and you just killed it and you were the talk of the sandpit and you just thought, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life?
Well, it kind of works in reverse because I knew I wanted to do it for the rest of my life, even when the gigs were really shitty. But there wasn't one single show where I played and everything changed. Although the evolution was pretty interesting because I was a solo performer until I met Brian and we started the Dresden Dolls when I was around 24, 25. And up until the time the Dolls started really like heavily touring and playing clubs, I was really nervous and never a very confident player. I maybe appeared confident to people, but I was just this like solo, intense, spooky and spooked out, solo piano chick. And it wasn't until Brian and I started playing as the Dresden Dolls that I feel like I really finally came into my own and had sort of really started to have the kind of self-confidence that I feel like I have on stage now. Mm-hmm. I owe Brian a lot. He's sort of, he and I were such a great combination in so many ways, I mean musically, hugely. Mm-hmm. But in those early days of the band, he was the more experienced one. Mm-hmm. I had just been playing my little solo shows in, bars and galleries, but Brian had already been touring in punk bands for 8 years. And even though he was younger than me, he was the experienced one when we went into clubs and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of at a loss, and Brian was like, get your shit together, girl, that goes there, and fuck you. And he like really took charge and motivated me. Mm-hmm. He doesn't always get a lot of credit for that.
Mm-hmm. Very good. I can't imagine you as a shrinking violet, but
no,
that's where you've come from. And what was the first song where you felt like you really found your voice?
Oh, Slide, I think, which is, I wrote it when I was 15, and it was the first song I wrote where I wrote it pretty much in one sitting, and I went, fuck, that's actually a good song. Whereas all the other songs I was writing, I was kind of embarrassed by because I listened to enough good music to know that they weren't like that. Mm-hmm. But that song was actually good enough that when I recorded the first Dresden Dolls record 10 years later, it went on there.
Cool.
So
And the first time question, first time you were nude on stage?
the first time I was nude on stage, what kind of stage?
Answer it.
Like a proper stage?
Yeah, like, this kind of...
That's a good question. I've never thought about that. Not in high school. Not in college. It's funny, my high school drama teacher tells this story about how we used to do all these great, crazy student-directed drama festivals. And he tells this anecdote about me where I asked him if I could be topless in this one part of this crazy theater production we were creating. And he said, no, this is high school. He was really liberal, but he was like always afraid of being fired. And I was like, okay, can I can't show my tits? He was like, no, Amanda, sorry, you can't, it's high school. And I was like, okay, can I show one tit? In college, I did a piece of naked performance art piece, but it wasn't performed on stage. It was performed on a cafeteria table and in front of the campus center on the ground. I just showed up bloody and naked to see what people would do. That was my senior year. The very, very heavily intellectual performance art piece. Just like, it was awesome, typical college wanky. I don't know, it might have been naked. It was either with the Dresden Dolls doing some skit or another, or it was the time I streaked onto stage in Boston when the Kaiser Chiefs were playing to try and make out with a singer.
Cool.
Successfully, I might add.
Nice. Interesting choice. I guess speaking of naked, I saw a great painting you did of Yana in a Perth park the other day, and part of the Kickstarter, she'd given you cash to come out and, do some incredible art. Tell the lovely people about all the Kickstarter stuff you've been doing since you've been in Australia.
Well, can I ask you guys, who has actually looked at the Kickstarter page, whether you donated to it or not? Who's seen it and kind of, a lot of you. So, and who here just has no familiarity with how it's laid out or has never seen a Kickstarter page? You've all seen it, right? Some of you? Okay, so basically the way Kickstarter works is you have a set goal. In my case, it was $100,000. You have a time period. In my case, it was 30 days. If you don't achieve that goal within a month or whatever your set time period is, you don't get funded at all. If you do achieve the goal, your backers' credit cards are charged. And generally, people have backer bundles going from $1 up to $10,000, which is the limit. And I used that entire span. So I spent a lot of time with my management team trying to figure out what we were going to offer, how we were going to price it. We made a lot of mistakes, which I'd be happy to talk to you about. It's actually really interesting also because Australia has just started, Kickstarter has just come to Australia. But long story short, there were cheaper packages like $5 for digital download, $25 for a really beautiful CD packaging, vinyl, so on and so forth. The highest package was $10,000. 2 people bought it, one in Washington, D.C., and one in Perth. And for $10,000, you got all the fancy stuff, the record player, the vinyl, all of the merchandise. And also, I would come and spend a day with you and paint you. Or you could paint me. You got to pick. And I just delivered the second of them in Perth for this girl, Yana. And it was an incredible day. I went over to her house. Her parents cooked me lunch. Her mother is French and her dad's British. And her younger brother came over and we just had this great family meal. She showed me all around her house. And I had actually met her at gigs before but hadn't made the connection. But she was hard to forget because she has a form of dwarfism. So she's short, but very beautiful. And she recently lost a friend of hers. She lost a friend right around the time the Kickstarter came into existence. She bought this package for herself as some kind of like symbolic gift to herself when her friend died. And she had planned this all out. Unlike the other $10,000 one I did where Neil and I showed up, my husband and I showed up at this couple's house in Washington, D.C., and we did a mural on their kids' room wall, which was fun. Yana wanted to go to the park across from their house where she'd grown up, and she wanted me to paint her naked. And I was like, this is amazing, and we might get arrested. And so we took out a canvas, and I'm like an amateur artist. I'm not great, but when I focus, I'm pretty good. And I spent about 2 hours painting her. But over those 2 hours, we talked about everything in our lives, and which was actually, I think, it's obviously a huge part of it. She's not just buying a piece of art. She's, we were getting to know each other, and by the end of the day, it was really incredible. I actually felt, when things like this go well, or I do a house party or something, I know it's going well if I feel really guilty to actually be paid to spend a day in a beautiful way. So.
Just on that, and on guilt and on paying, obviously after Kickstarter, your favorite topic, you asked musicians to play for hugs and beer and high fives, and then there was a huge fallout. And I spoke to you a few days after that, and you seemed quite resolute that, no, this is the way we've always done it. Would you do things differently again? Because you went back and you went, okay, we will pay musicians after the blogosphere went crazy and sort of said you were Satan.
Yeah, I don't think I would necessarily do things differently, but I might phrase it, or I might have constructed it differently. I was so used to years and years of our community just being so off the radar, and anything, the Dresden Dolls did some crazy shit, but nobody ever cared because it was all just internal. It was like, we had our weird little family and our touring and our crazy shit that we did with our fans, and no one ever commented or criticized because no one was watching. It was just us. And then after the Kickstarter, there was a lot of eyes on me, but I just kept operating the way I had operated successfully for 10 years. So someone actually pointed out something really interesting, which struck me as important, especially because I'm about to write a book, and this is going to be a big topic of consideration in the book, which is how and why we value things the way we do. And someone pointed out that if I had put a backer level in the Kickstarter at whatever, at $100, that you get the CD, the art book, the vinyl, and you get to come play on stage with the band, no one would have complained. People might have been like, oh, well, what crazy person would buy that? But it's so interesting. Like, what I see there is that as long as money is being exchanged either way, people won't criticize. And how weird is that? That actually, like, as long as there's an exchange and someone is paying for something of value, it was almost like it could have happened either way. But as soon as the exchange was non-monetary, people were like, well, this is fucked up. And I'm like, well, actually, it's not. We've been doing it that way for a long time, and everybody's always been pretty happy. So, yeah, I thought that was interesting.